We're going to look at a verse or a couple verses actually in the Old Testament, something that we haven't done in all the previous videos. But I want us to remember, I want you to remember something, is when we read in the Old Testament that we should see Jesus. Jesus said that all of the law and the prophets, all the scriptures, the Old Testament to us, that they testified of him. They speak of him. Jesus is the center of all that God has done and is doing. And we can see where Paul tells us about the Old Testament, the law and its purpose, and the new covenant, and compares this to like Hagar and Sarah. We're going to look at one that's verses that are quoted and referenced a couple places in Hebrews, really significant. But I want to go right to the very source, and it's in Jeremiah, in the book of Jeremiah, and it's in chapter 31. And there's a section here, starting in verse 31, in which God speaks through Jeremiah. And he said, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord." And the days that are coming, that he's prophesying of at this in Jeremiah, is now. It's already here. This is speaking and looking forward to the time of Jesus, when God was going to and did establish the new covenant, a new covenant, because this is what he speaks of. He says, "The days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." Now this is with Israel and Judah, and Judah is part of Israel, but the two were divided. There were two nations. But when we go back and we look and see what Israel represents and what the name means, and Paul himself says in the New Testament that you are the Israel of God. So it has to do with what the word means. And perhaps we'll look at that at some point to investigate and say, what does the name Israel mean? The names that this is a name that God gave to Jacob, and it is significant and it's meaningful. So, but want you to get is when he says he's going to make a new covenant with Israel and with Judah, this isn't the same, just the same group of people, descendants from Abraham, although we might all be. We don't know how Abraham's seed and blood was put, throughout the whole earth. But we are through Jesus, who is the promised seed of Abraham. Again, this is where all of the Old Testament testifies of Jesus. So what I want us to get is when we understand the name of Israel and see that it's a meaningful name, and you are the Israel of God. This isn't a replacement thing. This is actually taking the name that God gave to Jacob and seeing how it applies to you. And so he says, I'm going to make a new covenant, a new covenant. And it's verse 32, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. So this is a different covenant. He says it's not like that one. And if we are looking for it to be the same, or just a rephrasing or a rehashing of the old one, the previous one, we're missing the point. He says it's not going to be like that. That was a covenant that was based upon a whole religious system, upon laws written on tablets, upon a priesthood, a tabernacle, and then a temple. A lot of what we think of as do's and don'ts. There was a lot of stuff written into that. And as we looked at a few weeks ago, when the Pharisees came to Jesus and asked him about marriage, he explained to them what was written in Moses in the law. It does not properly reflect what God intended and wanted for you, but God allowed you to have that because you have hard hearts. And so much of what was in the Old Testament, that religious system, existed for a very different reason than what the new that is prophesied here in Jeremiah 31 that we experience. It's different than what that intends. Righteousness was never through the old. It is impossible. That was not its purpose. And that's important to remember. So he says, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be different. That covenant that I made with them, says the Lord, that's the covenant they broke. Verse 33, but this is what it's going to be like. This is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. So he's speaking of something personal. He says, I'm going to talk to you directly, not through the priest, not through Moses. I'm going to put my instructions, my ways within you. And I will be your God, your mighty one, and you will be my people. So notice the personal, relational aspect that he is establishing, that he's saying this is what that covenant will be like. And that is exactly what we have gotten, what we have been given. What we have is a relational covenant. It's a covenant. God said, I'm going to do this. And what's my role? What's your role? Your role is to let him do it. Simple as that. He said, I will do it. This is a covenant. It's not a contract. And this is beautiful. He says, I'm going to do this, and you're not going to need everybody to teach you. You're going to have me to teach you. So that's what he says, this covenant that you and I have with him, that we see is called the new covenant. It's not like the old. It is very different. It is personal and it's relational. And this is why it is so beautiful and so powerful.